Okay, so a few more examples. This next one here is the same sort of question. So our product is minus 35, our sum is positive 2. We look at our factor pairs for 35, 1 and 35 and 5 and 7. The 5 and 7 will give us the 2. This tells us that the highest number is going to get the plus, so the 7 will get the plus. And up here the signs have to be different because that's a negative. So if this has got a plus, this will have to be a minus to be different. So set it up with the 5c, 5c and 5. Put your two numbers in, minus 5 and plus 7. Then when we look at our brackets, we can have a common factor of 5 coming out of the first bracket and nothing common coming out of the second bracket. Cancel your 5s and you're left with your two brackets equal to 0. Make each bracket equal to 0 and solve the two equations. Okay, over here on F, these questions are starting to get harder. So we have 2x squared equals x plus 15. That's not equal to 0. So if you go back to the start of the notes today, you'll see the first thing is make sure it's equal to 0. So we're going to keep the 0 here. All the terms are coming to the left. The reason they're coming left is because I want to keep the x squared term positive. So if that had been a negative, we would have taken everything to the right. So we want to have our x squared term being positive. So we're going to keep that here, bring the x over to be minus x, and the plus 15 over to be minus 15. Now it's equal to 0, we can now factorise and solve it. So the product is minus 30, the sum is minus 1. Don't forget that if there's no number there, it's a 1. Go through your factor pairs, and the one we're looking for to get a 1 is 5 and 6. The highest is going to get the minus, so the 6 will get the minus. The negative up here says they're going to be different, so if that's minus 6, this will have to be plus 5 to be different. Set it up with your 2x, 2x and 2. Put your plus 5 and minus 6 into the two brackets. So looking for common factors, there's no common factor on the first bracket. There is a common factor of 2 on the second bracket, so take it out, and those 2's will cancel. So we're left with just the brackets. We're going to take each bracket equal to 0 and get our two answers. Now they're starting to get a little bit harder here, so you've just got to think really carefully. Now I said before that if you have a bracket, don't expand it. That's if it's already set up with the equal 0 and it's ready to go. But at the moment, we don't have it equal to 0. Alright, so we are going to expand the brackets here and see what's going on. So we'll expand these brackets and get 2t squared minus 13t. And then we are going to get our 0, so we're going to bring our minus 15 over to be plus 15. And now we're going to factorise this thing here. So the product is positive 30, the sum is minus 13. Going through our factor pairs for 30. We already did those before, but here they are again. And to get a 13, we're looking at these two. Actually, we could have been looking at either of these. Hope I've done it right, we'll soon see. So in this one, that could have been subtracted to give you 13, and this could be added to give you 13. So this is telling us that the highest of each of them has to have the negative. So I've given the negative to the 10, but I'll give it here to the 15 as well. Up here, the signs have to be the same. So if that's negative, the other one has to be negative. Now, if you look at them, we have to get a minus 13 when we collect them. Minus 3 minus 10 does give you minus 13. But minus 2 minus 15 does not give you minus 13, so we can cross that out. Okay, so continuing on, set it up with our 2t, 2t and 2. Put your two numbers in. And then for factorising, there's no common factor on the first bracket, so keep it. On the second bracket, we're taking out a common factor of 2 and leaving us with a bracket of 10 minus 5. Now we're going to cancel those 2's and leave us with just the brackets equal to 0. Make each bracket equal to 0 and solve your equation. Over here on this one, questions like this are often mucked up in tests because people just sort of do things like divide by 4 on both sides or divide by 4f on both sides. If you start doing things So when you do it, you've got to look at it, see that there is a letter being squared. That makes it quadratic. So, if it's a quadratic equation, we've got to make sure it's all equal to 0. So you have to bring this 4f over to be minus 4f, and now we've got it equal to 0. We can look at factorising this thing on the left-hand side. So the most basic method of factorising, which you should always try first, is the common factor. We can take a common factor of 4f out here. That will leave you in the bracket with 2f minus 1. And now we're just going to make each bracket equal to 0 and solve the equation. Okay, so if you do anything else, so sometimes what people will do is something like this. Because legally you can divide every term by the same thing. We've done that sort of thing before. But there's a problem here. I'll show you the problem. That'll cancel down. That's gone. So what we're looking at the moment is this. Now this is where it becomes a problem. So if you then cancel these f's, that's actually a 1 over there. And if you cancel the f's here, you're left with 2f. And you can see the answer was f equals 0 and f equals a half. If you do it with this method, you're only going to get f equals a half, and you've lost half your marks because you've lost an answer. Okay, the reason for that, for those of you who understand what I'm talking about, you don't worry too much. But when you have divided by an f, you haven't considered the idea that you may have been dividing by a 0. So you can divide by anything, but once you divide by a letter, you have to consider that possibility. And if f equals 0, you're actually dividing by 0. And if you go to your calculator and divide anything by 0, it's not defined. You're not going to get an answer. Okay? So what actually happens is you've lost the answer of 0 along the way because it's got no chance of coming out in the solution here. Alright, so you needed to test whether f equals 0 was a solution or not. And if you actually check back up in the original thing, it is. If you put a 0 in there and a 0 in there, 8 times 0 squared equals 4 times 0, that will give you 0 equals 0. That's true. That's a true statement. So f equals 0 is a solution, but you lost it in your working. So I don't think this is a good idea to do this because you're often going to lose one of your answers. If you don't understand what I just spoke about here, don't worry about writing it down at all. But if you do understand it and you can see where I'm coming from, it's a good idea to write this down as a possible error and why it doesn't work. How we lose that answer of f equals 0. Alright, this last question is a word problem. A certain positive number plus its square minus 72 equals 0. Find the number. So we're going to let n equal the number and try and form an equation. So it says certain positive number, we're going to call that n. There it is. Plus its square, n squared, minus 72 equals 0. So we formed our equation. But when you rearrange it, because we need to have the squared term first. So we're going to swap these. So we've got positive n squared starting us here, positive n moving into here, and just keep that. Alright, so now we've got n squared plus n minus 72 equals 0. We're going to factorise and solve it. So the product is minus 72. The sum, don't forget, is the number in here. There is no number, so that's a 1, positive 1. And if you look through your factor pairs for 72, the only factor pair that gives you a 1 is the 8 and 9. They subtract to give you a 1. So the highest has to get the positive, positive 9. sign, so this will make the 8 a negative. So now we don't have to worry about any number in front of this squared term, so we just can keep it as n. So we've got n and n in our brackets. Minus 8 and plus 9 going in. Take each factor or each bracket and make it equal to 0 and solve the two equations. Now, there is a little complication in this one, and for those of you who think this gets put in a test, they will probably be sorting out a few of you because you haven't read it properly. If you look right up in the top line, it did tell you that this number is positive. And if we look at our answers, we've got 8 and negative 9. We can only give the positive answer. So n equals 8, that's your only answer, because the number is positive. They told you that in the question, so you have to read it and look at it when you go to check your answer. Okay, so have a look at your homework and have a go at it. You shouldn't have any problems with it because we have done all of this before. Good luck.